No, we've got quite a lot to get through this morning, so we will just open up. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining this morning's webinar, The New Approach to Events Traffic Management, What You Need to Know. This is presented by Elise Freeman, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Parallax. Elise has extensive experience in traffic management, from leading event operations to consulting on major civil projects. NZEA actually started this piece of work in July last year and have worked with Parallax and NZTA, along with many of you that are on the call, to pull together this new practice note. We hope that this webinar will help you understand your event's true road impact using a straightforward classification tool so you can make more informed decisions about the level of temporary traffic management your event requires, and also apply standardized thresholds for when a traffic management plan are actually needed, ensuring consistent, efficient approval processes across councils and road controlling authorities. We wanted to shift from a compliance-first mindset to a collaborative outcome-focused strategy, where event organisers, RCAs, TTM providers and planners can work together on what truly makes an event safe. I know that I have certainly learned a lot along the way on TTM, traffic management, and I hope that you all find that this webinar very useful. I will pass it over to you. Thanks, Elise.
Cool, thanks, Elaine. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that, no problem. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you everyone for your time today and your attendance. I know it's a lot to take an hour out of everybody's diary, but I am very excited to finally be able to put this out to the community and out to the industry. It's been a bit of a journey, as Elaine was saying. So I see that we've got a lot of event organisers and councils on the call, which is fantastic. This is absolutely for you. This was really created for you and for the benefit of your events. So just before I crack into it, just a couple of pieces of housekeeping. You will see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. If you have questions along the way, if you could please pop your questions in there. Elaine will be monitoring, and if she can answer some questions, she will. Otherwise, I'll have some time set aside at the end of this just to go through those and answer any questions that might pop up along the way. Try to avoid using the chat function. It's not as good, so just stick with the Q&A. That would be grand. There will also be a recording of this webinar sent out at the end, and that will be posted on NZEA's website. So you'll be able to navigate to the landing page there. That is also where you'll be able to find the resources like the guide itself and some instructional videos and the templates that go along with the guide. So yeah, myself, I'm Elise from Parallax. I spent many years looking after events for event organisers in the TTM space. So everything from designing the traffic management plans to being on the ground with the event organisers on event day, and being like an integral part of the success of events. It was great. It was a lot of work. There's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that goes into events, and to see them be impacted by the cost of TTM, yeah, it's quite disheartening, and we wanted to do something about that. We all enjoy attending events in one aspect or another, be that sporting or cultural and concerts. So we wanted to make sure that we can carry on delivering those types of events and they are not getting cancelled due to costs or over compliance. So who is this practice note for and how did it arise? It really came from some more vocal frustration throughout the industry, escalating costs, as I mentioned, some inconsistency in processes when it came to applications, for example, and kind of some confusion around the requirements of TTM for events. So we're seeing this come through even, just recently with the Anzac parades. Again, there's been some media attention once more around different traditions being lost with not being able to use main streets, for example, and just being stuck in that compliance space with TTM, which is where we can see the costs rise. So it's a great time for us to be able to jump in and explore these different options. Originally, before I started all the consultation process with the stakeholders and the industry, I thought I was just going to be kind of creating a guide that showed different diagrams and layouts on how to run events. But interestingly enough, once we got into the consultation process, that was not the pain point at all. It was actually much earlier on where the struggles were coming from, and that was in the application and planning process, both with the event organizers and the RCAs or the local councils. So there was a mismatch of kind of communication and understanding in that space. So the two key lines of effort that came through that this practice note is focused on, firstly, is for the event organizers. So being much more informed buyers of TTM through a greater understanding of how their impact might impact the road network. And as a result, RCAs are going to get better information from the event organizers and the TTM planners around what they're asking to do on the network. And we're hoping that we can get a more unified approach from the councils and the RCAs in terms of what their trigger points are and what they're asking for in terms of controls for the risks and the impact that the event is going to introduce into the road network. So I just wanted to flick through some of the key parts of the guide. There is a animated video, which I'd recommend watching once you're ready to jump into the guide and have a read. There is an animated video that takes you through how to process and how to move through the guide. So check back with that. It's going to be on NZEA's website, and it will just give you a bit of a refresher. But part A, the introduction, I'm not going to lie, it could be a bit dry for everybody. It is health and safety and risk management focused. Bear with me. We have to do it. So it is a refresher in terms of your requirements, everybody's requirements and responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So I've tried to make it as specific to events as possible. I've given you some templates. I've given you some guides in terms of how to go through a risk management process to try and make it as easy as possible for you to go through that part. So that's the key kind of outcomes that you'll see from the introduction. It's also got all of the people that we consulted with. Thank you for anyone who's on the call that were part of our stakeholder groups. It was really good to catch up with everyone kind of once every 2 months and run through where we were at and get feedback. So those are the kind of like the key points there from part A. We've got a refresher on the Health and Safety Work Act, how it relates to planned events and what your core obligations are. Then we jump into understanding how an event might actually impact the road network. And the aim here was to educate the event industry, so event organizers, on all of the kind of different closure types and kind of demystify some of the really specialist TTM jargon, maybe when people are talking about different closure types, maybe you're not fully aware of what that means. What do people ask, or what do people mean when they're talking about parking resolutions? So it really dives into unpacking all of that, hopefully in a way that's manageable for you to understand. I went heavy on the graphics, a very visual learner. I know we all are, most of us in this industry. So I'm hoping that that kind of helps you in the informed buyer of TTM space and helps you ask better questions of your TTM providers, but also your TTM planners. So I want you to be able to question, do we really need to do that? Is a full closure really what we need here? Is there something else that we can do? So I'm hoping that that will set you up to be able to use the classification tool. So it's really important that you understand part B before you move into your classification tool. It looks like this. It's a web page, so there's a link. The link is in the document itself, and I'll make sure that there's a link on NZEA's web page as well. So it will take you through to a website or a web page, and you simply drop down, tick box, select your answers to these questions. Why it's important to read part B before doing this is because there is some language in here that you might not fully understand what it's relating to. that is unpacked in Part B. So if you're unsure about this and you do end up just going and having a quick squiz, it's important that you go back to Part B to make sure that you're not over-categorizing or under-categorizing your event. So once you've completed the form and you've pressed submit, it's going to come up with your impact classification. So it's going to say you're a low impact, medium, moderate impact, or a high impact event. At that stage, if something doesn't quite look right, it gives you a big breakdown of all of your results on the page. Something doesn't quite look right, you can go back or you can reset. Otherwise, you can download that information as a PDF, and it's a really good repository for you to be able to send to the council or to the RCA and go, hey, here's what I'm looking at in terms of impact for the network. It's classified me as a moderate impact. From what I understand now, I need to apply for XYZ, traffic management plan, event permit, waste management plan, etc. So as I mentioned, it will spit out one of 4 categories. I have included play streets and club events in the assessment tool, only because there might be some situations where you fall outside of what is called a planned public event. And so I have included the play streets and club events in that. That's that top yellow box that you can see. However, really in-depth information about those 2 types of events is excluded and out of scope of this practice note, because firstly, with play streets, they already have their guidelines. And I've put a placeholder in the practice note, gives you a brief outline of the guidelines and a link to the guidelines as well. And then for club-run sports events, I've put some really basic kind of roles and responsibilities in there. I still wanted to include, those statutory requirements, the responsibilities, and clarified that even though this is not a planned public event, there are still safety and risk management expectations of the club. So I've put those in there along with some really cool examples that I found from Sport New Zealand. So the events that you see in the blue box, so low impact, moderate impact, and high impact, they're the ones that we really deep dive into, and I give you some examples and case studies. And then in addition to that, if you are a high impact event and you possibly fall into the MEMA Act category, so the Major Event Management Act area, there's some additional information there around maybe if you are a high impact, international kind of recognition is falling into that category. There's some information around what that might look like if you start moving into the MEMA space. So that's the different event impact classifications that you will fall into.
Elise,
and
so
yeah,
one question come through,
yeah,
asking if the results of the classification tool are visible to you only, or is the data stored in the back end?
not stored at all. No, it's only for you. Once you move away and navigate away from that web page, the results are lost. So that's why I've got the download PDF button. So you'll want to store that locally for yourself. We don't keep a record. There's no record kept of that. Thanks for the question. Okay. Yeah, so you'll see that once you finish using the tool, you navigate and have a read in one of your event classifications. So for high impact events, when I was writing the guidance in terms of what's required for high impact events, there was a lot of repeated information from the moderate events, just in terms of like the process that you need to go through with applying for event permits and TMP applications, etc. So I didn't repeat that in the high impact area. I've simply just left placeholder links there so you can click back and have a look at the process of what's involved if you do come through needing a TMP, for example, or a event permit. In the high impact event space, I really focused on some case studies around how we could optimize TTM, and I'll show some examples of that shortly. There's a section on parking resolutions and how you might apply for them, when you would need to apply for them, what some of your alternatives might be if you've got a really short time frame, because there's some legislation tied to removal, like legal resolving of parking spaces, and sometimes you don't make that window of kind of 42 days. So what are your other options that you could go to a TTM company for example, to help you manage that? Who owns them, who you need to be asking, if it's public, private, paid, for example, whether or not you're going to have to reimburse council for removing paid parking, all of that good stuff is in part D for you. And then a really important part that I thought long and hard about was part E, which is training event workers. In November of last year, the COPTIM NZTA warrant system for TTM got switched off. So all of those STMS, TMO, those types of qualifications, that warrant system got switched off, and the industry is moving to a credentials framework with NZQA. That means that we do really fall back on the HASWA in terms of our flexibility with who we use for what role. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. But I've put some templates in there, and I've put some guidance in around training workers. There's some videos in there as well, some recordings on how to do a good briefing, how you might install signage yourself if you're installing signage, how you will possibly be managing vehicles onto a site like a car park, for example, if you're bringing them into an event space and you need to manage vehicle movement plans. All of that is video based in there for you to be able to watch. There's some really good learning modules from WorkSafe that I've put in there as well for volunteers. So that one's quite resource packed for you, so that you can possibly have dedicated people that could look after what might have been traditional traffic management type roles. Yeah, kind of just went through that. So then case studies and research. I wanted to make sure that I had some serious backing in there for us to be able to lean on to say, no, we've done our research and we've looked at some case studies, and here's a different way for us to do traffic management for events. So it is based on, and I've been aligning it as much as possible to the new risk-based framework, the New Zealand Guide for Temporary Traffic Management. And with that, we go to science, or we go to case studies, we go to research as our evidence framework for things that we want to do differently. So one of the key things that I looked at, and this is just tying back to that volunteer or the event worker kind of utilization, is permanent crossings and existing crossing points, and how we might be able to utilize those spaces for events where maybe traditionally we would employ TTM to come out to do those roles, looking at what the road code states, what would be reasonably expected of vehicle, road users in that area, taking lessons from school crossings, for example. And really it comes down to making sure that your staff are adequately trained, instructed, and supervised in order to carry out the role that they're doing. So there's a really good example. I've put a lot more detail in the practice note itself around examples that you could use, also signalized intersections. There could be, case studies, or there could be cases where you could use your own event workers in these types of situations instead of having to employ TTM. Road closures and parades has been probably one of the bigger focal points, and maybe one of the biggest triggers for the development of this practice note itself. So I did dive into a little bit more of specifics around the options that we've got for parades. And I wanted to detail what a rolling closure would look like, what a rolling road closure would look like, rather than what a static full road closure would look like, the pros and cons, when it would work, when it wouldn't work, and how we can keep the network moving without putting out loads of traffic management, having to put out loads of static detours, for example. How can we just make it really quick and efficient? Some of the media that we've seen recently is like, there was hours worth of TTM installed for a 15-minute walk down a main street. That's broken. That's just not right. So I wanted to show that it's very easy to do a rolling road closure. maybe TTM providers were not sure how. I wanted to provide that guidance for them here. So I did go into a bit of detail in terms of an example diagram for this type of operation. On top of that, I wanted to show an example of what we used to do. I say used to do a long time ago, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, was we would utilize shopping center car parks and internal roads. They're private roads. You don't need to get approval from the road controlling authority to use their roads. Obviously, if there's other intersecting roads, then we do, but the impact that we might have on those intersecting public roads will be very minimal compared to running a parade on that public road. So here's just a brief example for those of you who are Auckland based. This is Sylvia Park Shopping Centre. It doesn't open till 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Could be plenty of time to run a parade prior to that centre opening. You've got fantastic infrastructure when it comes to car park availability and public transport straight into the back of the centre. And you've got quite a decent, I think I clocked it about 1.2 kilometres worth of a parade route that you could use. Ample viewing opportunity, safe areas for people to be able to stand. And then of course, the shopping centre gets the spin-off of everybody possibly flowing in to the stores after the event. So just some options there. I'm not saying that we want to move every parade off the road, but these are some mutually beneficial options that, could be explored. Then I had a quick dive into, okay, we put out a lot of equipment. Most of the time events will cover a large a large area, especially sporting events, running, cycling. They can cover some ground. And with that comes intersecting side roads and a heap of traffic management gear. So I really wanted to have a look at what's doing the most in terms of notification to the road user, what's actually effective and what's ineffective. And what I found was that clear and context-specific signage does the most for the road user. So if they understand straight away from looking at a sign what's happening, they're probably going to make better decisions about what they're going to do next. So instead of our typical hazard advanced warning signs that we use for events, maybe the actual road closed ahead or road closed sign itself is giving better context and information to the road user. Having a visible person on site, either police, marshal, or a traffic controller, also ups that compliance and the adherence to maybe going in a different direction, and then the right level of delineation for the risk profile of the point. So that means if it's a low risk point, maybe just a couple of cones is fine. If it's a more high risk point, you might be looking at some form of vehicle block or fencing or a barrier or something like that. So that was quite interesting. And so I've kind of shown some examples in terms of where you may or may not need signage just due to visibility to the closure point. And if people can see and it's visible, maybe we don't need all of the additional gear, because at the end of the day, the longer that the TTM crews are out there installing gear, the more exposed they are to incidents happening on the network. Then a question popped up in my mind around how many people actually use GPS these days versus no GPS in their vehicle and they are just going by mind or maybe even a map. So I really wanted to understand what's the percentage of road users that are following a GPS in their vehicles these days, because that would really inform us how valuable our signposted detours are for major events, for example. So some people may recognize what this event could be, but I based it off my understanding of Auckland Marathon, for example, where Tamaki Drive is closed. And technically, we would have to provide detours for everything that you see on that map there that's highlighted. But really, the closer that you get to the epicenter and the more local those roads are, the need for signposted detours really drops because people know their way around, they know where they were going, where they need to be. However, the further out that you get and the higher the level of road, like arterial routes or motorway ramps, some formalized TTM posted detours are still really required. So there is some interesting research around this and some alternatives that I've put into the practice note for you. There's some very cool technology coming through with our VMS boards, our variable message boards, and it could be an alternative that you put out. It gives you the flexibility to put in the moment information up on those boards and kind of be able to manipulate and dictate where traffic goes a bit easier throughout an event. So some ongoing pieces of work that we've still got. This is a live document. This is definitely not something that's static. And so please, by all means, if you see anything in there that seems a bit out of sorts or you want to provide some feedback, feel free to pop something through to me. But we do have a review request going through to the Minister's office around the legislation that governs road closures. There are two key pieces of legislation that govern road closures, and they are a bit mismatched when it comes to events, and it's quite complicated. And so we've proposed what our utopia essentially would look like for events under those pieces of legislation. And we'll be meeting with them in the next couple of weeks, Elaine and I, to put that proposal through. That also came through from the stakeholder group. So once again, thanks to any stakeholders on the call who contributed to that session. It was a great session to hear from you all. And the other piece of work that's still happening is the rollout of this guide and the impact classification tool onto all of the local council or RCA websites. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get that in there and we get some adoption from the local councils and the RCAs that they like this approach and they agree with this approach and it works for them and hopefully does some heavy lifting for them in the consultation coordination space going forward. So I'll be doing some work with the local councils over the next few months in that space. And finally, I'll also be at the Eventing the Future conference early September, where I hope to be able to share some case studies or some more case studies with you. I'm actively tendering for events still. I still am delivering events, traffic management for events myself. And I'm trying to put this into practice so that I can bring some real life case studies to you and show you maybe a before and after compliance-based, risk-based. So stay tuned. Where to find all of this information, just head to the NZEA website. There's going to be some information, the slides, the link, and the recording all sent out after this webinar. But this is your hub. So just navigate here. It's going to have our contact information. You can reach out at any time. Feel free to either myself or Elaine. And yeah, really welcome the feedback. Definitely. If something's not working, please get in touch. So I've done a lot of talking. I will stop sharing my screen and flick over to the questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Elise. It's so good to see it so succinct, given that we've gone through so much work to get to a 30-minute presentation on this. So yeah, it's obviously really great just to see it come to fruition after all of this time. I'll just see if there's any questions. One question here: are there plans to add hostile vehicle mitigation advice into the guide? I'll let you answer that. I know we've discussed it.
Yes, we've touched, I've put a section in this, I think it's in the high impact event space around some of the new policies that have come through from the NZ Police around if you are thinking that something like that your event might be attracting maybe some political attention. There's a new policy out from the New Zealand Police around the process to go through to notify them and get in touch with them, and then they'll give you their recommendations. I've also put that into the template that you've got for your event application. So your health and safety management plan that I've done a template for, it's at the very bottom section around if there's any kind of political attention that you might want to put extra security in place. All of the links are in there for you.
And just on that, Kathy, I know that the New Zealand major events team are also currently looking at that as well. So that might just come into the new MEMA Act that they're currently working on as well. Another question, we have tried to remove detour signage from local roads, but often get retrospective requests from locals, Airbnbs, council to add them back in. These suggestions with this.
Yeah, okay. So that's really like managing the environmental aspect of where you're working. If you are in maybe a tourist hub, those traditional detour signs might have to go back in. So it really is on a case-by-case basis in terms of what you're dealing with in the area with stakeholders or with, you know, the local community. But, you know, if you're closing one main street, for example, and there's very clear ways to get around that main street, the need for those detours drop down. If it's maybe a more abstract street and there's no clear way to get around and it's a little bit more of a convoluted detour, then yeah, those traditional signposted ones do come back in.
Thanks, Elise. There appears to be a disparity amongst RCIs nationally on whether they are or will follow the guide and what they expect from the industry. Is this being considered as part of this process to have them all on the same page?
That is my utopia, if you like, for this. I would absolutely love to be able to get the adoption of this process across all of the RCAs. We're probably about 50% there in terms of adoption, I would say, across the RCAs. A lot of them are accepting both. There is still a function under the old system, if you like, the COPTIM system, to be able to apply risk-based thinking. If the COPTIM is not fit for purpose for whatever reason and it's not managing the risk correctly, we still have a function there that we can use. It's the old EED system, the engineering exemption decision system. We can still tap into that if we need to. This is obviously a more streamlined system for those that are guide risk-based RCAs. So by all means, I would say get in touch with your TTM planner early and ask, hey, I need to submit a TMP to this council. Can you tell me, are they risk-based or are they code-based? And that's going to really assist with your planning. But we've still got probably, I would say, 12 to 24 months ahead of us in terms of clarity with our RCAs with which way they're going to go.
Right, thank you. And as an event organizer, if I train my staff to safely install TTM signage on equipment and can prove they are competent in doing so, does that mean I won't have to rely on a TTM service?
So they could assist, but you're still going to need somebody to manage a formal traffic management plan. So there still needs to be an owner, for example, of a traffic management plan. That should be a qualified person in the industry, or you'll be able to prove qualification in the industry. We have unit standards in that right now available to be obtained. However, if you're going to supplement some people, yes, you could do that. You would absolutely need to have that evidence and proof that they are well trained and competent. You can supplement them in. However, the overall management and ownership of the traffic management plan should still sit with an industry trained person. That could be yourself. You could get yourself up to that spec, and then you've got delegates underneath you, for example. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. For now, that is all of the questions. Cool. If anyone has any more that they want to quickly add into the chat box. One more. One more. Cool. I am involved in event management for horse endurance riding. We have competitors using road verges on low volume roads and only occasionally crossing roads. Riders must obey road rules. Some councils have been requiring very expensive TMP and TTM. We have a small groups of riders, 5 to 6 max, and are only moving at 5 to 20 kilometers an hour. Where do we fit in?
Yeah, this is exactly where we go. There is no change to the normal operating condition of the road. You're not impacting the network. You're not creating undue delays. You're not asking a road user to change the way or the behavior that they have day-to-day driving down that piece of road. And therefore, we're advocating that there is no TMP required. There should be nothing required there. If you are obeying and you're giving way and you're not asking anyone to change the way that they're driving on the network, there should be no need for a traffic management plan or TTM for that.
Louise, we will be sharing Elise's details with you post this if you wanted to get into some more detail around that, because it does sound like you've had some issues with
absolutely. Yeah. Happy to be a mediator between any RCA councils and event organizers to help bring those two things together. I know it's hard. It kind of feels like you're often being put in a box and you're not sure how to get out of that because maybe you don't have the language or you're not sure what's required of you. So absolutely happy to be that go-between if you need.
Perfect. There is a comment here that I will read out just for you to think about. Is a risk for the industry is that clients are starting to push to have their volunteers do TTM and are putting pressure on traffic companies. The clients say it is without compromising health and safety. However, it is generally purely a cost basis. I don't know if you want to talk to that, Elise, or...
Yeah, without compromising health and safety. I mean, it just goes back to, I have no issue with, when you've got multiple very low risk road closures, for example, you put event volunteers now, as long as they're well trained and instructed and briefed on what they need to do. And there's details in there around that for you, but that shouldn't be an issue at all. Those more dynamic, higher risk points, yeah, a professional should be on there, somebody that is used to that and understands a little more about how that intersection maybe works. That's where, a professional should be in there, but otherwise there should be no issue with volunteers being utilized for very basic low risk points.
Perfect, thank you. And with the previous training system being switched off, is there any impact? For example, does this mean that previously qualified people aren't qualified until they do the new training?
There's a grandfathering system, so they are still fine on the old system for 3 years, and then the expectation is that they are shifted onto the new system. Now there is some fast pathways that you can do, a recognition of prior learning or a recognition of prior experience, where you can apply just for the unit standard and obtain that straight away rather than having to go back through and do the training again. Otherwise, you go through the normal NZQA training system and you obtain that new unit standard. So still a grandfathering, they're not just switched off, but you're no longer able to obtain the old qualification.
Thank you. Ellie has said that they are in negotiations currently to look at trialling a risk-based approach TMP at an event to showcase to council this could work in our region at our venue. What other evidence should we be looking at providing?
So the evidence for risk-based, you would want to really start with what are the risks that you're introducing. Start there and build outwards. Don't start with, I think I need a road closure. Don't start there. Start with, okay, what are the things that we are doing or bringing into the road network or into an area that is going to change the way that road users use the network. Now, remember that road users include vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists as well, vulnerable road users. So start there. Say, how am I changing or impacting the way that people are using the network? What do I need to do to mitigate that? And what is the council's appetite and threshold levels in terms of what's acceptable and unacceptable? What's an acceptable level of disruption? What's an unacceptable level of disruption? Or what's an acceptable level of risk and what's an unacceptable level of risk for yourselves? Because if something goes wrong or if someone's hurt, you're going to be liable. And then the RCAs and the councils have a duty of care to their network and their road users for safety as well. So those are the two buckets that you need to look at: the level of risk for you as an event organizer and the level of disruption and road user disruption for the council side of things. there is a full risk management template that I've done for you that will help you walk through all of those steps. And then you can simply submit that to the council if you like, as your kind of due diligence of a risk management system.
Right. Thank you very much. Those are all of the questions for now. As I mentioned before, we will be sending a recording of this webinar along with the slides that Elise shared today, and a link to the website where all of this will also sit. And we will also share Elise's details if you have any direct questions that you wish to ask her, along with my own details as well. So please do not hesitate to sort of reach out to us. This has obviously been a huge piece of work that many people in the industry have been part of. So it is really great to finally see it come to light. I want to take this opportunity also to thank Elise for her tirelessly hard work on getting this done. And we really do hope that it is helpful for the industry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks for everyone for being involved. And I hope that it can do some good for the industry. I really do.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. Everyone go and enjoy your day, and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you. See ya.